My name is Jessie Doyle, and the myth that I've chosen to tell is The Little Mermaid. If you're anything like me, two versions of this story immediately pop into your head. The 1989 Disney Adaptation animated feature The Little Mermaid, and the original folktale by Hans Christian Andersen. Let's get started with a synopsis of the original folktale. The Little Mermaid lives in an underwater kingdom with her father, the king, and her older sisters. Contact with the surface world is strictly forbidden except for one day on their 15th birthday. The Little Mermaid watches and listens as each of her older sisters get to travel to the surface on their 15th birthday. When they come back, she is enraptured by their stories of boats, humans, and starts to put together a picture of what life must be like up there. Finally, it's her 15th birthday, her turn to go to the surface. When she does so, she sees a ship hosting a birthday party for a prince, and she becomes enamored not only with human life, but falls in love with the prince himself. As the Little Mermaid is watching this birthday party for the prince, a huge storm hits. His ship sinks, and he is drowning. She grabs him, swims him to shore, and leaves him on the beach next to this temple. She waits until ladies from the temple bring him inside, knows that he is cared for, but is sad that he never sees her. When she returns to the underwater kingdom, she is hyper-fixated on human life. She starts to ask her family questions about how long humans live, the difference between humans and mermaids, and she starts to think about becoming human herself. The main difference in the original folktale between humans and mermaids is that humans have an eternal soul, so after they die, they go to heaven. Mermaids do not have an eternal soul. They live for 300 years, and then they turn into sea foam. The Little Mermaid is in love with the prince, but she also longs for an eternal soul. She wants to go to heaven after she dies. She wants to be human. So she contacts a sea witch and employs her to create a potion to turn her human. The witch again warns her of the differences between humans and mermaids. She says that if the Little Mermaid becomes a human, she will never be able to return to the sea. Even in this human form, she does not have an eternal soul. In order to gain an eternal soul, she must get the prince to fall in love with and marry her. As payment for the potion, the sea witch takes the mermaid's voice, as she's known to have the most enchanting voice in the world. She swims to the surface and takes the potion, where she goes through the excruciating transformation. Taking the potion is extremely painful. It feels like her body is being divided by a sword. Even after she becomes human, each step feels like she's walking on knives. The prince finds her naked on the beach and is enchanted with her despite the fact that she can't speak. They become companions. They start doing everything together. The prince treats her as a sort of confidant, but he does not fall in love with her. In fact, he tells her that he sees her as a little sister. As a matter of fact, the prince is in love with a woman from the temple who he believes is the one who rescued him from drowning. When it's revealed that the temple woman is actually a princess from a neighboring kingdom, the prince proposes to her and the royal wedding is planned. The prince, the princess, the mermaid, and other members of the kingdom set out aboard a wedding ship to celebrate the new marriage, and the Little Mermaid's heart breaks. She can never see her family again. She can never return to the sea. She will never gain an immortal soul because she's failed to get the prince to fall in love with her, and the prince chose someone else over her. She dances with him one last night, and then he retires for the night with his new bride. As the mermaid is crying into the sea, her sisters sense her despair and rise to the surface. They tell her that there is one way to get out of the witch's curse. They give her a knife and say that if she kills the prince and drips his blood onto her feet, the sea witch's curse will be lifted. If she does this, she will turn back into a mermaid and she can live out the rest of her days with her family in the ocean. She takes the knife, but as she sees the prince lying there with his new wife, she thinks of all the good times they had together and she can't bear the thought of taking his life. She decides to sacrifice herself for his happiness and throws herself into the sea, knowing that if she does so, she will turn to sea foam and die. However, as she sinks into the sea, she finds herself not dead, but surrounded by ethereal light spirits who call themselves the Daughters of the Air. They're very angelic in nature, and as she looks down at herself, she realizes that she is one of them. They tell her that her good deeds and her striving to gain an immortal soul has earned her some extra time. She will remain a daughter of the air until she can do enough good deeds to prove her worthiness of an immortal soul, and then she gets to go to heaven. The mermaid is happy with this conclusion because it means that she gets to watch over the prince as he lives out the rest of his days happy with his new family. And that's the end of the Hans Christian Andersen tale. The 1989 Disney adaptation has roughly the same synopsis, but with a few key differences, including the ending. Difference number 1, the mermaid has a name. Her name is Ariel, and she's 16, not 15. All contact with the surface world is forbidden by her father. We find out in one of the direct-to-video sequels that this is because Ariel's mother was killed in a fishing accident by humans. Ariel has visited the surface many times, and she has a vast collection of human artifacts. As in the original tale, Ariel travels to the surface one evening and sees a ship with a birthday party being held for Prince Eric. She watches them dance, is enamored by human customs, and falls in love with the prince. A storm hits, Prince Eric nearly drowns, and Ariel saves him by swimming him safely to shore. There is no temple in this version. Ariel leaves Prince Eric on the beach outside of his own castle. Another difference from the original is that the prince does start to regain consciousness and sees the mermaid for just a moment. He does not put it together that she's a mermaid, but he does become obsessed with her song, playing it over and over. Upon returning to her underwater kingdom, Ariel discovers that her collection of human artifacts has been uncovered by her father. Her father despises humans and destroys her collection in a fit of rage. She runs away. Enter the sea witch Ursula, who plays a much more active role in the events of this version. Ursula's pet eels Flotsam and Jetsam inform Ariel that Ursula can make a potion to turn her human and live with Eric. Ariel realizes that this is the perfect way to rebel against her abusive father and get what she wants, living on the surface. There is no mention of the differences in lifespan between mermaids and humans in this version, but the catch is, if Ariel drinks the potion, she has only 3 days to make the prince fall in love with her, or she reverts back into a mermaid. Not just fall in love with, but also bestow true love's kiss. This brings me to another key difference between the two versions of The Little Mermaid, being that the 1989 adaptation is a musical. Ursula sings a song explaining the rules of the potion and also revealing that she has made a business of helping poor, unfortunate souls who come to her for magic potions, and when they can't pay, she turns them into little seaweed-like creatures. Ariel explains that she has not brought any money with her, and the witch says, "All I want from you is your voice." In this version, we, the audience, have seen Ariel sing. We know she has a beautiful voice. Her entire family is very musical, as she misses a concert at the beginning of the movie. Reluctantly, she agrees to give the witch her voice, and Ursula stores her voice in this shell necklace. Ursula makes the potion, applies it to Ariel. We see a very dramatic scene that looks incredibly painful, where Ariel's tail splits into 2 legs, and then she is guided to the surface because she doesn't know how to swim as a human. Like in the original, she's naked on the beach, and the prince finds her. At first, he thinks he almost recognizes her as his rescuer, but then when it's revealed that she can't speak, he says, "Oh, never mind, you couldn't have been who I thought." But being a nice guy, he takes her back to his castle anyway. They have dinner. She's allowed to sleep there. During dinner, she realizes that her knowledge of human artifacts is partially incorrect. She tries to use a fork to comb her hair. She takes a tobacco pipe and blows into it like a musical instrument. Everyone thinks she's very odd. But despite this, the prince invites her out on the town. They spend a day driving around in a carriage, watching a puppet show downtown. They dance. He has to teach her how to dance because she's still a little wobbly on her new human legs. That evening, they go for a romantic boat ride. You see that they have long conversations despite the fact that Ariel can't speak. They play a name-guessing game where the prince ultimately guesses that her name is Ariel. There's another song. They almost kiss, but are thwarted at the last second by Ursula's pet eels. They return to the castle, and we see Prince Eric having a conversation with his butler, where he expresses that he really wants to wait for the woman who rescued him. He feels like she's his soulmate, and his butler says, "Why not go with the one that's right in front of you," pointing to Ariel getting ready for bed up in her window. We later see Eric contemplating this further. He plays a flute, and he plays Ariel's song, what he remembers from her singing to him on the beach after he rescued her. He once again looks up at Ariel's bedroom window, and we realize that he has fallen in love with her, despite not knowing that she's the one who rescued him. He throws his flute into the ocean, signifying that he has fallen in love with Ariel and has chosen a life with her, despite the fact that she can't speak and isn't the one who saved him. Right as he's about to go up to Ariel's bedroom and declare his love, we see a mysterious woman on the beach wearing a shell necklace and singing Ariel's song. It's Ursula in disguise. That kiss was just too close, and now she's here to take matters into her own hands. Ursula hypnotizes the prince with Ariel's voice and convinces him that she is the woman who rescued him from drowning. Immediately, a wedding party is planned. Everything takes place on a boat, just like in the original. The wedding ship departs near sunset on the third day. Ariel's spell is about to wear off. She's about to revert to being a mermaid, and she is heartbroken that the prince has chosen someone else. She sits on the dock and cries. One of Ariel's friends, a seagull named Scuttle, sees the prince's new bride getting ready for the wedding and singing to her reflection in the mirror. As she turns the mirror, we see that her reflection is none other than Ursula the Sea Witch. He quickly reports back to Ariel, tells her this news, and suddenly it's a rush to catch up with the boat and stop the wedding. Again, Ariel doesn't know how to swim as a mermaid, so her friends employ the use of some floating barrels to help her kick her way to the ship. Chaos ensues, but ultimately the shell necklace is ripped from the bride's neck and smashed, returning Ariel's voice to its proper owner. As the necklace is broken, it also breaks the hypnotism on Prince Eric, and he runs into Ariel's arms, telling her, "It's you, you're the one I was looking for." Once again, they almost kiss, but the sun is setting in the sky, and Ariel feels her legs turn back into a mermaid's tail and falls to the ground. Ursula also transforms out of her human disguise and back into her true sea witch form and drags Ariel below the surface. Ariel's father, King Triton, comes to her rescue. He gives himself in Ariel's place, and he is turned into one of those seaweed creatures that we saw earlier in Ursula's cave. Now it is revealed that this was Ursula's true intention all along. With King Triton transformed, she takes his crown and trident and becomes the ruler of the underwater kingdom. Ariel fights back against Ursula, grabbing the trident, causing a beam of light to shoot out and accidentally kill Ursula's two pet eels, Flotsam and Jetsam. Ursula becomes enraged. She grows into a giant multi-stories high version of herself. She uses the trident to call upon a hurricane. The hurricane stirs up shipwrecks from the bottom of the ocean. Prince Eric takes advantage of this and steers one of the ships into Ursula's abdomen, killing her. With Ursula dead, all of her spells are ended. All of the polyp seaweed creatures turn back into mer people, including King Triton, and he regains his title as King of Atlantica. Eric returns to his kingdom, and Ariel watches him from a rock. The evil is defeated, but they still can't be together. She is still a mermaid. Her father, seeing how unhappy she is, uses the magic of his trident to give her human legs once more, this time permanently. She runs to Eric on the shore, he embraces her, they kiss, and then they are married in a lavish ceremony on one of the ships. Merfolk and humans are united as a rainbow shows in the sky. Ariel gets her happy ending. Now let's get into the analysis. Why I think these stories are myths. Both versions of the story are heavily permeated into modern culture. Disney Ariel's iconic red, purple, and green color palette is recognizable to any child, even outside of her country of origin, the United States. The original folktale drew on existing myths, such as the sirens from Homer's Odyssey, and perhaps more directly from Selkies from Celtic and Norse mythology. Both mermaids share qualities with the sirens because they are known for their dulcet singing voices, and share qualities with the Selkies because they give up their tails in order to have relationship with human men. These stories resonate with children, especially young girls who feel different from their peers. For me, playing mermaids in the pool was extremely foundational. Part of me still hopes to catch a glimpse of a mermaid tail anytime I visit the beach, even as an adult. I don't know if this aspect was intentional, but something I really want to draw attention to is the mermaids as a metaphor for navigating romance as a disabled person. The original folktale plays into the infantilization of disabled people. The audience is made to pity her, and the fact that she doesn't win love in the end reinforces that disabled people cannot be loved or are not mature enough to experience romantic love. This trope is subverted in the animated Disney version. It's established early in the movie that Ariel can handle herself. When we are first introduced to her, she outwits a shark, saving both herself and her friend Flounder. While she is nonverbal for most of the movie and even requires assistance with walking and dancing and swimming, we know that Ariel is a strong, smart, and capable young woman, not someone who needs to be babied. Now, one might argue these characters aren't disabled, they're mermaids who got turned into humans. Anyone would struggle with mobility after that, to which I say, that's a disability. But more importantly, both of these characters show multiple characteristics of both physical disability and neurodivergence. And most importantly, I, as a young disabled person, saw myself in them. Some examples of behaviors that the characters share with people with disabilities. Ariel misses her family concert. This could be an allusion to a condition that affects memory and time management, such as ADHD. Her collection of who's-its and what's-its is quite extensive, implying that she spends every free moment engaging in her special interest. This could be classified as a hyperfixation. The original mermaid shares this special interest. Her friends and family consider her to be abnormal and find this obsession worrisome. This is an experience shared by many autistic children. In order to fully engage in their special interests, both mermaids must trade aspects of their physical independence. They both give up their voices and trade their tails for legs. The original mermaid also gains chronic pain in exchange for access to human society. Upon arrival in the surface world, both mermaids struggle to fit in. To quote Ariel from Disney's direct-to-video sequel, The Little Mermaid 2, Return to the Sea, I was a regular fish out of water. Andersen's mermaid has the added difficulty of experiencing physical pain, quote, as though walking on knives, end quote, with every step she takes. Having experienced plantar fasciitis myself as a teen, I thought of this folktale often. I still see this story as a metaphor for the hurdles that disabled individuals must overcome in order to participate in society. Although the mermaid has dedicated her life to learning about this world and becoming a part of it, the world is not accommodating to her. Many of us must endure physical or mental discomfort in order to enjoy a day with our friends, a walk in the park, or even our daily routines. I feel the Disney movie could have included more about the mermaid's difficulty with walking, but I understand that the concept of feeling anguish with every step might have frightened some children. We see Ariel quickly adapt to getting around on land. She even shows some natural physical talent by dancing and driving a carriage. So is Disney's version of The Little Mermaid still disabled? I think so. As I mentioned before, Ariel shows signs of hyperfixation, struggles with time management, and feels like an outsider even after she's transitioned from mermaid to human. We see that she experiences anxiety upon learning that her knowledge of human tools is incorrect, and is often shown in a state of depression surrounding her relationships with both Prince Eric and her father. Both stories pit the ingenue against another female character. This character becomes a rival love interest for the prince. This rivalry serves to show us even more that the mermaids do not fit in. They feel like imposters and struggle with feeling like adequate partners for their respective princes. In both stories, the other woman appears to be more feminine, more mature, and more skilled than the mermaid. We, as the audience, see that she is more successful at romancing the prince, and we root for the mermaid as the underdog. These feelings of inadequacy are very relatable to people who have depression, anxiety, are autistic, or have any number of other conditions that can make socialization and dating intimidating or otherwise difficult. In the movie, this other female character is Ursula the Sea Witch disguised as a human woman, and she has the prince under a spell. In the original folktale, the woman is a princess from a neighboring kingdom who nurses the prince back to health after the mermaid saves him from drowning. Both mermaids see the prince as confused. The audience can imagine that they're thinking to themselves, if only I had my voice, I could tell him it was truly I who rescued him, and he would fall in love with me. Their muteness, in this instance, is seen as a shortcoming that keeps them from obtaining what they really want, love. In the folktale, the prince truly falls in love with the other woman. They have conversations at length and discover many mutual interests, some that the mermaid cannot participate in due to her chronic pain, like dancing. He expresses to the mermaid that he is grateful to have met her, but sees her as a confidant and a little sister, once again infantilizing her. In the movie, the prince has fallen in love with Ariel. Unbeknownst to him, Ariel is the one who saved him from drowning and sang to him. In the moments before he's hypnotized by the sea witch, we see him throw away the flute that he's been using to play Ariel's song. This symbolizes that he has chosen to be with her over pursuing the siren who rescued him. He has fallen in love with her, even without her voice. Ariel ultimately regains her voice and is revealed to be a mermaid. Prince Eric does not see this as a limitation to their relationship. He is ecstatic that the woman he has fallen in love with is also the woman he was fantasizing about all along. We now know that Eric wanted to pursue a relationship with Ariel while she appeared to be mute, and before he knew that her odd behavior was due to her being a mermaid. It would have been interesting to see a version of the movie where Ariel never regained her voice. Perhaps they would have had a fulfilling romantic relationship by using other methods of communication, such as sign language or writing with a pen and paper. In this way, the movie falls short, but I still consider it to be good disabled representation. It sets the foundation that disabled people can be attractive, hold romantic relationships, and find a place in society. Many criticize the Disney version as anti-feminist, since Ariel left behind her entire family and identity in pursuit of a romantic relationship. However, I argue that the movie is inherently feminist. Let me give you an alternate synopsis of the 1989 Little Mermaid, and you might see what I'm talking about. A young woman who feels like an outsider at home flees an abusive relationship with her father in order to pursue her passion, anthropology. The transition is rocky, but as she adjusts, she finds love along the way. As mentioned in our textbook, the morals of a story change depending on who is telling it. They also change depending on what the audience needs to get from the story. For me, this is a story about liberation. At the end of the film, Ariel has a healthy relationship with her family, a healthy relationship with her husband. She lives among humans just as she always longed to do. She's also royalty, and therefore could afford to collect as many human artifacts as she wants. I like to think that she probably funded a local archaeology program, enlisting the help of merfolk to retrieve underwater treasures. The moral of the movie is fight for what you want and who you love. Ariel's father's storyline provides an added message of support your children's passions and let them love who they love. Now, the ending of the folktale is a different story with a different message. The prince marries the other princess, and after dancing with him at his wedding one last time, the mermaid, in her despair, throws herself into the sea. She knows that by doing this, she will turn into sea foam and die. She also knows that, according to mermaid myth, there is no heaven or equivalent afterlife waiting for her. She is grieving and committing suicide, but her last thoughts are grateful. At least, she thinks to herself, the prince is happy. But then she doesn't die and finds herself surrounded by these angelic daughters of the air creatures. She will now be blessed with an afterlife and will be able to see the prince and protect him from harm. She becomes his guardian angel of sorts. And she's overjoyed. This is a happy ending for her. This ending infuriated me as a child. It centers the prince in the story, and the title character, who never even has a name, loses her whole identity. What kind of a reward is watching over your ex for all of eternity? Here, it's important to note that the author, Hans Christian Andersen, was a man who lived during the early 19th century. Andersen reportedly experienced attraction to both men and women, making him bisexual. Like The Little Mermaid, he experienced unrequited love on multiple occasions. In fact, the line from the story, "I see you more of a sister," is pulled directly from a letter that Andersen received from a woman who he was in love with who didn't feel the same. Hans Christian Andersen was a Christian. He would often write in his journals about staying chaste. He must have felt that he would earn God's favor in the afterlife for keeping his feelings to himself. He must have felt that he was suffering in silence as the objects of his affection found happiness with other people, which is very reminiscent of the mermaid herself. We see this belief of heavenly reward for your actions played out with the mermaid and the daughters of the air at the end of the story. I think what made me so angry as a kid was how close the original folktale gets to a feminist ending and message. With a few tweaks, it could have been groundbreaking for its time. Perhaps the angel-like creatures at the end restore the mermaid to life, return her voice, and transport her to another kingdom where she becomes a famous singer and lives out the rest of her days. Perhaps she even falls in love again. Another option, the angels resurrect her but leave her disabilities in place. Instead, they introduce her to humans with similar conditions who show her how to use mobility aids, alternative methods of communication. If you want to keep the Christian theme in place, she could even earn her way into heaven by being an advocate for human disability rights. This is a good example of how myths are a product of their time and a product of the people who wrote them. Hans Christian Andersen was a Christian, so The Little Mermaid takes on a Christian message. As is, the moral of the Andersen version seems to be unrequited love will only lead to heartbreak. Andersen may not have written the story with disabled people in mind, but when you add in the fact that the mermaid seems unable to win the prince's affections, at least in part due to her perceived physical shortcomings, the story takes on a message that disabled people are unlucky in love or undeserving of love. Through a feminist lens, another interpretation of the story's moral could be, don't throw away your community and identity for a man who doesn't love you back, although the mermaid is still rewarded for her actions at the end. It's possible that Andersen did condone some themes that could be considered radical or feminist for the time, such as breaking ties with your family, setting out on your own to seek your passions, and friendship between men and women. In conclusion, when viewing The Little Mermaid as disabled representation, both stories get a lot right and a lot wrong. Both can be considered progressive for their time in some ways, encouraging female liberation, but also promoting domesticity and romantic love as the ultimate achievement. Ultimately, I'm glad that they have both been woven into the fabric of our society and modern mythology. Both provide a relatable hero for me and other outsiders to look up to, and both perpetuate the evolution of mermaid myths, ensuring that Selkies and sirens live on in the collective consciousness. Thank you for watching. I'd like to end on a special acknowledgement. Samuel E. Wright, the voice of Sebastian the Crab, unfortunately passed away on May 24th, 2021 at the age of 74. So thank you to Samuel. Your character and this movie has meant so much to so many of us.